on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke. Last night we kicked off the NFL season, and now all eyes are on the Sunday main slate. So in this video, I'm going to give you some of the cheaper options that I see myself playing. They're also going to be a little bit lower owned, that not only are going to give you much needed flexibility when going up to spend up for an extra stud or two, but more importantly, also are low owned, so you can get some of that much needed ownership leverage to the field on the flip side. So that's the idea with this video, coming out a little bit later on in the week when we have an idea of, first off, the injury situations with some of these teams, but also the ownership situation that accompanies some of these lower owned plays, or lower priced plays, I should say, because some of them aren't necessarily so much low owned. So we'll talk about some of the chalk pieces in terms of value, but more importantly, my top 5 picks. Now let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. All right, we've got my projections on the screen, and we'll go ahead and get this thing started with our pick up top. The most expensive value we'll talk about, just under the threshold that I'd consider a value, which is $5,500, and that is Miles Sanders out of the chalk Philadelphia Eagles stack there at $5,400. Now, Jalen Hurts, going to be maybe the highest owned quarterback on the slate, if not one of the higher owned players, period, and pretty much across every position. I mean, you have a few running backs like Jonathan Taylor, a few wide receivers that get close to 20%, perhaps like Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. But outside of those elite level players, you're looking at 11-12% ownership on Jalen Hurts, which for a quarterback is probably like a 25 to 30% owned skill position player. So outside of that, I'm looking to differentiate a bit. I mean, that Detroit defense, that team in general, is going to be a little bit of a pushover for pretty much even the weakest teams in the NFL, let alone a high octane offense like the Eagles that pretty much everybody and anybody is hyping. And the real reason that Hurts is getting all of this attention is all of the narrative this offseason has been about how A.J. Brown being added to the offense, of course, new offensive coordinator taking over the reins there, that the whole scheme was going to look different. And frankly, while I tend to agree a bit with some of those sentiments, I'm not sure if it's going to be a 0 to 100 sort of transition. I mean, like anybody week one, we're making our best educated guess, and a lot of people last night, myself included, thought that Cam Akers might get a majority of the load, thought that Allen Robinson might get quite a few targets there in that scheme, and oh boy, were a lot of us wrong there. So I think we have to realize that we don't know quite as much as we think we do when it comes to week one DFS. That's why a lot of sharp bettors like myself try to, take it a little bit light early in the season, get a little bit of that data, a sample size to work with, and then come weeks 2, 3, especially week 4, we're ready to go out there and fire with all of our cylinders. So that's what I would say. Any of these super chalky situations, perhaps try and target that game environment, because undoubtedly the Detroit Lions have one of the weakest defensive units across the NFL. It should be a cakewalk for, like I said, most of the NFL, particularly a team like Philly that should be relatively competitive this year. Maybe just go with Miles Sanders. Right, they're going to be in the lead. I expect them to have a positive game script, to be playing with the lead from at least halftime. And if that's the case, that should be more carries for all of the Philadelphia ball carriers. Try and run out that clock, protect the football, right? Don't make any unnecessary risky throws there with quarterback, and win the ball game, right? Go out there, rely on your defense, take that 7 to 10 point lead, whatever it may be, and ride it out to victory. I could see them playing that narrative a lot more than what everyone else is expecting, which is a 50 to 60 attempt game from Jalen Hurts, right? They're thinking it's going to go 0 to 100. You're going to see a completely different offense. Whereas last year, Philly was one of the most run-heavy teams of all of the NFL. Now, they weren't number one in terms of rush rate, but they were up there in the top 3 for pretty much the entire season. So I would pump the brakes a little bit on the narrative that they're going to go out there and look like a completely different offense. I think that it'll certainly be a little bit more balanced, but maybe guys like Miles Sanders at $5,400 are being a little bit more overlooked than they should be. And you can see ownership is only at 4.7%. He's definitely being overlooked in that department. The projection is still there, 12.3 points. So it's not like I have him projecting off the board. It's not like I expect him to be one of the better point per dollar plays at the position. That is far from the truth. But at the same time, I also think that he has touchdown upside, or potentially even multiple touchdown upside against a weak defense, as he can contribute both through the air and on the ground. Next up, we've got Zach Ertz playing in the chalk game of the week. That is going to be Arizona versus Kansas City. You're going to see, nearly 20% ownership on somebody like a Travis Kelce. At quarterback, you're going to have nearly 9% ownership on somebody like Mahomes, which is up there, 10% on Kyler Murray, both among the chalkiest plays at that position, just behind Jalen Hurts. So I'm going to try and get different there too. And one of the players that I think might be a little bit overlooked is going to be Zach Ertz. And I would also lump Rondale Moore into this situation. Now, a few days ago, Rondale Moore looked like he was going to be one of the chalkiest plays, but at this point, hasn't practiced throughout the week. And here on Friday, that was also the case. So you're looking at somebody who's likely closer to doubtful than he is questionable there on the injury report, so more than likely going to be rolled out. And then with Zach Ertz, you have the opposite, right? To start the week, he was a little bit more iffy than somebody like Rondale Moore, but has practiced here on Thursday, and then once again on Friday was able to get onto the practice field. So that indicates to me that Ertz is probably a little bit more likely to play than Moore, but if both of them end up playing, I think that they're going to be lower owned than they should be because of the injury concerns. And you can see as of right now, I have Ertz at 6% ownership, which is far from nothing, right? Up there at the top. I mean, Andrews I have right around 8%. Again, you have like 18 to 20% on Kelce. He's surely a piece of chalk. But Ertz at $4,400, which is a clear misclick. I mean, the guy is at least $1,000 too cheap right there. Isn't getting a lot of attention because people are a little bit timid to get to him with the injury. If Rondale Moore is going to come in around 10%, who is also similarly mispriced for the slate, particularly with how strong of a game script or game environment it is between Kansas City and Arizona there, they're going to be players that I'm getting to in bunches. So I know it just says Zach Ertz here. We'll have to keep an eye on his injury status, especially as it is a later game. They're right around 4:30 p.m. But there are plenty of other cheap options at tight end that I'm comfortable getting to that also start in the later window. So if you end up getting stuck with Ertz, he's scratched late, that sort of thing. Same thing with Rondale Moore. You're going to have plenty of options to get to as a contingency. Next up, we've got Jakobi Meyers. And Meyers isn't just a play for me in week one. He's also a player I expect to break out here in the 2022 season. Has a great rapport with Mac Jones. There's been a lot written about that this offseason. And also, Mac Jones is going to have a much larger influence on that New England offense this year than what he had as a rookie. You've heard Bill Belichick even say that, and he's somebody who keeps his cards as close to the chest as humanly possible. And he's already admitted that Mac Jones looks good. He's definitely going to throw the ball more this year. And I expect not only him to drive the production of the offense, but some of these higher-end wide receivers, because frankly, they're not very deep at wide receiver. I mean, you got somebody like Jakobi Meyers out there, Devontae Parker, right? A few tight ends that are at least serviceable, right? Hunter Henry. You'll have, I believe, Jonnu Smith is the backup over there in New England. Actually, he might be on another team now. Either way, they have a few tight ends that can get the job done. I believe Jonnu Smith is backup. The real drivers of this offense are going to be those intermediate pass targets, which is going to be Devontae Parker on one side, who, I think it's going to take him a little bit of time to get used to the offense, right? He's a new face there, doesn't have nearly as much rapport with the offense as somebody like Mac Jones and Jakobi Meyers, whereas Jakobi Meyers is that reliable hand, right? So assuming that he plays, he was a limited participant on Thursday. We have yet to get his practice report here on Friday. If he suits up on Sunday, I expect Meyers to be a dominant piece of this offense. In fact, probably by far the largest target share of anybody on that offense. And I think it's at least a 7 to 10% buffer between him and the second highest target share. So I love him there at $4,300 as I almost knocked my light down and hit myself in the face there. That would have been quite funny. But he's $4,300. The matchup against Miami isn't ideal. I will say that Miami is one of the better defenses that you have across the league. A deep unit, secondary is more than serviceable back there. They also have a decent pass rush too. It's a divisional game. These Miami versus Patriots games also get a little bit nasty, I'd say. They tend to be a little bit more defensive-minded than a lot of other divisional affairs out there, like what you have between Minnesota and then up there in Green Bay. But I still like it. I expect him to get a huge target share. He's only $4,300. And at a 12.6-point projection, he projects for nearly 3 points per dollar, which there's only, I believe, one player on the slate that I have projected at over a 3 point per dollar projection. And at $4,300, he's one of the handful of guys that gets pretty close there, and only 6.6% owned. Next up, also on the other side of the Arizona game, so with Kansas City, I'm taking a shot on rookie Skyy Moore. So another player that we don't know all that much about. We don't know what kind of role he's going to have on that offense, but a lot of people speculated after that he was drafted that he might be playing that Tyreek Hill role, right? Going from Kansas City to Miami, drafting a young, explosive wide receiver. I mean, the reasons for the parallels were evident ever since he was drafted. And frankly, he hasn't had all that much hype behind him. Not a lot of people have talked about Skyy Moore this offseason. Sure, I'm sure a lot of Kansas City fans right there are really mad right now. They're like, oh, what do you mean? I've seen this guy play. Yeah, I have too. I've watched the tape, and from what I can tell, he looks just like Tyreek Hill. Fast, going to use him on jet sweeps, a lot more screen passes early than I expect downfield passes. But when this guy can build a relationship with Mahomes, get on the same page with his route tree, I'm expecting him to be at least a contributor on this offense. I mean, he's going against Mecole Hardman, guys like Marcus Valdes-Scantling. I know they're established veterans, guys that can get the job done, but if this rookie shows any signs of promise, if he can go out there and show that he's at least an average player, he's going to get the opportunity over some of these older players because he can grow into something better, right? Whereas you're pretty sure, at least I think that Kansas City is pretty sure that they know what they have with guys like Hardman and Marcus Valdes-Scantling. So Skyy Moore, look out for him. He could have a larger role here in week 1 than people are at least expecting there. And at $3,800 in the best game script on the entire slate, and also only 3.1% owned. So not many people are willing to get there. I think that he's well worth the investment. And the last value we'll talk about is arguably the strongest value on the entire slate. And that is going to be Irv Smith Jr., a player who plays for the Minnesota Vikings going against that Green Bay team. They talked about another divisional matchup that's going on here in week 1. A little bit higher game total than what you have there with the Patriots and Dolphins. But most importantly, he is a great fit for any sort of run back with one of the more expensive Green Bay stacks, or one of the pieces you can use in a Minnesota Vikings stack. So if you're going with Kirk Cousins, somebody like Justin Jefferson, who will be extremely popular this week, especially with Kirk Cousins, and then match him up with Irv Smith Jr., you can still build a relatively balanced lineup. So that's the kind of utility that you're getting with Irv Smith Jr. You can use him as a buyback for any Aaron Rodgers stack, perhaps matching him up with an Allen Lazard if he plays, still questionable, hasn't played much this week, hasn't practiced much this week, I meant to say, or with an Aaron Jones, right? A little bit more of a premium stack there where you're taking a 7K and a 6K option, or with the Kirk Cousins side, a 5K quarterback with a nearly 9K wide receiver. Having an Irv Smith Jr. balances out your build. If you go and try and take a more premium tight end, you're going to have to spend down at wide receiver, perhaps spend down at running back. And if you've seen any strategy videos that I've put out here on the channel when it comes to NFL DFS, you know that that's something that I try to avoid. Taking value running backs can work later in the year. They also tend to be extremely chalky, so it comes with that downside. But early in the year, when there aren't that many injuries, most players have been protected throughout the preseason, not given any opportunity to go out there and even get injured to begin with. You don't have that same sort of value. So for me, tight end is a great position to go out there and punt in week 1 without a lot of this value that opens up due to injury. And on the flip side, with wide receiver, right, I like pivoting there a little bit more, punting there with the $3,000, $4,000 range. But tight end is definitely the one that I prefer. So I project him for 8.3 points, a little bit more ownership, so he is the chalkiest play of anybody here on this list, which might be a little bit surprising, but I think it's well worth eating there. He's in a good game script. It's not like he's 10, 15% owned. And because you can play Irv Smith Jr. at the flex spot, as a tight end, I think that gives him quite a bit of utility there as well. All right, boys, that is all I've got for the value picks. I'll remind you that tonight at 7 p.m., we will be going live to touch on the main slate. We'll be going through every single game, talking through any injuries, the expected game environment, whether it'll be high scoring, low scoring, some stacks you can take, also any live questions that you have down there in chat, and overall, just prepare you for this weekend slate. We'll talk some strategy, make a few lineups, and you won't want to miss it. So I'll make sure to put a link down in the description of this video to that. Also tomorrow, I'll be putting out a fades video. So that'll be 5 of the players that I won't be playing here for week 1 that I expect to be a little bit overhyped. Perhaps it's due to matchup or just true median projection. I don't think they're worth all the attention that the rest of the guys out there are giving them. So that's what I'm thinking for. Make sure to stop by the live stream tonight. Best of luck with all of your lineups for this week. Any outright bets, if you're going with that perspective, trying to perhaps hit a little bit of a parlay there. Definitely a sucker for those myself. But like I said, best of luck, and let's get this cash.